Hello and welcome to Bookspot. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time we begin our reading of The Rolling Stones by Robert Heinlein. Heinlein was a prominent science fiction author in the last century and wrote many books that are famous and widely read today, most notably, I think, Stranger in a Strange Land. That was an adult science fiction novel, but he also wrote many for young adults, and Rolling Stones is one of them. So here we begin The Rolling Stones. Chapter 1 The Unheavenly Twins. The two brothers stood looking the old wreck over. Junk, decided Castor. Not junk, objected Pollux. A jalopy, granted. A heap, any way you look at it. A clunker, possibly, but not junk. You're an optimist, Junior. Both boys were 15. Castor was 20 minutes older than his brother. I'm a believer, Grandpa, and you had better be too. Let me point out that we don't have money enough for anything better. Scared to gun it? Castor stared up the side of the ship. Not at all, because that thing will never again rise high enough to crash. We want a ship that will take us out to the asteroids, right? This superannuated pogo stick wouldn't even take us to Earth. It will when I'm through hopping it up with your thumb-fingered help. Let's look through it and see what it needs. Castor glanced at the sky. It's getting late. He looked not at the sun, making long shadows on the lunar plane, but at Earth, reading the time from the sunrise line now moving across the Pacific. Look, Grandpa, are we buying a ship or are we getting to supper on time? Castor shrugged. As you say, Junior. He lowered his antenna, then started swarming up the rope ladder left there for the accommodation of prospective customers. He used his hands only, and despite his cumbersome vacuum suit, his movements were easy and graceful. Pollux swarmed after him. Castor cheered up a bit when they reached the control room. The ship had not been stripped for salvage as completely as had many of the ships on the lot. True, the ballistic computer was missing, but the rest of the astrogational instruments were in place, and the controls to the power rooms seemed to be complete. The space-battered old hulk was not a wreck, but merely obsolete. A hasty look at the power room seemed to confirm this. 10 minutes later, Castor, still mindful of supper, herded Pollux down the ladder. When Castor reached the ground, Pollux said, "Well, let me do the talking." The sales office of the lot was a bubble dome nearly a mile away. They moved toward it with the easy, fast lope of old moon hands. The office airlock was marked by a huge sign, Dealer Dan the Spaceship Man, craft of all types, scrap metal, spare parts, fueling and service, AEC license number 739024. They cycled through the lock and unclamped each other's helmets. The outer office was crossed by a railing. In back of it sat a girl receptionist. She was watching a newscast while buffing her nails. She spoke without taking her eyes off the TV tank. "We're not buying anything, boys, not hiring anybody," Castor said. "You sell spaceships?" She looked up. "Not often enough." "Then tell your boss we want to see him." Her eyebrows went up. "Whom do you think you are kidding, sonny boy? Mr. Akesian is a busy man." Pollux said to Castor, "Let's go to the Hungarian cast. These people don't mean business." "Maybe you're right." The girl looked from one to the other, shrugged, and flipped a switch. "Mr. Akesian, there are a couple of Boy Scouts here who say they want to buy a spaceship. Do you want to bother with them?" A deep voice responded, "And why not? We got ships to sell." Shortly, a bald-headed, portly man dressed in a cigar and a wrinkled moonsuit came out of the inner office and rested his hands on the rail. He looked them over shrewdly, but his voice was jovial. "You wanted to see me?" "You're the owner?" asked Castor. "Dealer Dan Akesian, the man himself. What's on your mind, boys? Time is money." "Your secretary told you," said Castor ungraciously. "Spaceships." Dealer Dan took his cigar out of his mouth and examined it. "Really? What would you boys want with a spaceship?" Pollux muttered something. Castor said, "Do you usually do business out here?" He glanced at the girl. Akesian followed his glance. "My mistake. Come inside." He opened the gate for them, led them into his office, and seated them. He ceremoniously offered them cigars. The boys refused politely. "Now out with it, kids. Let's not joke." Castor repeated. Spaceships. He pursed his lips. Luxury liner, maybe? I haven't got one on the field at the moment, but I can always broker a deal. Pollux stood up. He's making fun of us, Cass. Let's go see the Hungarian. Wait a moment, Paul. Mr. Akezian, you've got a heap out there on the south side of the field, a Class 7 Model 93 Detroiter. What's your scrap metal price on her, and what does she mass? The dealer looked surprised. That sweet little job? Why, I couldn't afford to let that go as scrap. And anyhow, even it's scrap, that would come to a lot of money. If it is metal you boys want, I got it. Just tell me how much and what sort. We were talking about that Detroiter. I don't believe I've met you boys before. Sorry, sir. I'm Castor Stone. This is my brother Pollux. Glad to meet you, Mr. Stone. Stone. Stone? Any relation to the Unheavenly Twins? That's it. Smile when you say that, said Pollux. Shut up, Paul. We're the Stone Twins. The frost-proof rebreather valve. You invented it, didn't you? That's right. Say, I got one in my own suit. A good gimmick. You boys are quite the mechanics. He looked them over again. Maybe you were really serious about a ship. Of course we were. Hmm. You're not looking for scrap. You want something to get around it. We've got just the job for you. A General Motors jump bug, practically new. It's been out on one grub stake job for a couple of thorium prospectors, and I had to reclaim it. The hold ain't even radioactive. Not interested. Better look at it. Automatic landing and 3 hops takes you around the equator. Just the thing for a couple of live active boys. About that Detroiter, what's your scrap price? Ikezian looked hurt. That's a deep space vessel, son. It's no use to you as a ship, and I can't let it go for scrap. That's a clean job. It was a family yacht, never been pushed over 6 Gs, never had an emergency landing. It's got hundreds of millions of miles still in it. I couldn't let you scrap that ship even if you were to pay me the factory price. It would be a shame. I love ships. Now take this jump bug. You can't sell that Detroiter as anything but scrap, Castor answered. It's been sitting there 2 years that I know of. If you had hoped to sell her as a ship, you wouldn't have salvaged the computer. She's pitted, her tubes are no good, and an overhaul would cost more than she's worth. Now, what's her scrap price? Dealer Dan rocked back and forth in his chair. He seemed to be suffering. Scrap that ship. Just fuel her up and she's ready to go. Venus, Mars, even the Jovian satellites. What's your cash price? Cash? Cash. Ikezian hesitated, then mentioned a price. Castor stood up and said, You were right, Pollux. Let's go see the Hungarian. The dealer looked pained. If I were to write it off for my own use, I couldn't cut that price, not in fairness to my partners. Come on, Paul. Look, boys, I can't let you go over to the Hungarians. He'll cheat you. Pollux looked savage. Maybe he'll do it politely. Shut up, Paul, Castor went on. Sorry, Mr. Ikezian, my brother isn't housebroken, but we can't do business. He stood up. Wait a minute. That's a good valve you boys thought up. I use it. I feel I owe you something. He named another and lower sum. Sorry, we can't afford it. He started to follow Pollux out. Wait! Ikezian mentioned a third price. Cash, he added. Of course. You pay the sales tax? Well, for a cash deal, yes. Good. Sit down, gentlemen. I'll call in my girl and we'll stat the papers. No hurry, answered Castor. We've still got to see what the Hungarian has on his lot, and the government salvage lot, too. Huh, that price don't stand unless you deal now. Dealer Dan, they call me. I got no time to waste dickering twice. Nor have we. See you tomorrow. If it hasn't sold, we can take up where we left off. You expect me to hold that price, I'll have to have a nominal option payment. Oh, no, I wouldn't expect you to pass up a sale for us. If you can sell it by tomorrow, we wouldn't think of standing in your way. Come on, Paul. Ikezian shrugged. Been nice meeting you, boys. Thank you, sir. As they closed the lock behind them and waited for it to cycle, Pollux said, You should have paid him an option. His brother looked at him. You're retarded, Junior. On leaving Dealer Dan's office, the boys headed for the spaceport, intending to catch the passenger tube back to the city, 50 miles west of the port. They had less than 30 minutes if they were to get home for supper on time. Unimportant in itself, but Castor disliked starting a family debate on the defensive side over a side issue. He kept hurrying Pollux along. Their route took them through the grounds of General Synthetics Corporation, square miles of giant cracking plants, sunscreens, condensers, fractionating columns, all sorts of huge machinery to take advantage of the burning heat, the bitter cold, and the endless vacuum for industrial chemical engineering purposes. A Dante-esque jungle of unlikely shapes. The boys paid no attention to it. They were used to it. They hurried down the company road in the flying leaps the moon's low gravity permitted, making 20 miles an hour. Halfway to the port, they were overtaken by a company tractor. Pollux flagged it down. As he ground to a stop, the driver spoke to them via his cab radio. "What do you want?" "Are you meeting the Terra shuttle? Subject to the whims of fate, yes." "It's Jefferson," said Pollux. "Hey, Jeff, it's Cass and Paul. Drop us at the tube station, will you? Climb on the rack, mind the volcano, come up the usual way." As they did so, he went on, "What brings you two carrot-topped accident prones to this far reach of culture?" Castor hesitated and glanced at Pollux. They had known Jefferson James for some time, having bowled against him in the City League. He was an old moon hand, but not a native, having come to Luna before they were born to gather color for a novel. The novel was still unfinished. Pollux nodded. Castor said, "Jeff, can you keep a secret?" "Certainly, but permit me to point out that these radios are not directional. See your attorney before admitting to any criminal act or intention." Castor looked around. Aside from two tractor trucks in the distance, no one seemed to be in line of sight. "We're going into business." "When were you out of it?" "This is a new line, interplanetary trade. We're going to buy our own ship and run it ourselves." The driver whistled. "Remind me to sell 4-planet export short. When does this blitz take place?" "We're shopping for a ship now. Know of a good buy?" "I'll alert my spies." He shut up, being busy thereafter with the heavier traffic near the spaceport. Presently he said, "Here's your stop." As the boys climbed down from the rack of the truck, he added, "If you need a crewman, keep me in mind." "Okay, Jeff, and thanks for the lift." Despite the lift, they were late. The squad of Marine MPs heading into the city on duty preempted the first tube car. By the time the next arrived, the ship from Earth had grounded and its passengers took priority. Thereafter, they got tangled with a changing shift from the synthetics plant. It was well past supper time when they arrived at their family's apartment a half-mile down inside Luna City. Mr. Stone looked up as they came in. "Well, the star boarders," he announced. He was still sitting with a small recorder in his lap, a throat mic clipped to his neck. "Dad, it was unavoidable," Castor began. "It always is," his father cut in. "Never mind the details. Your dinner is in the cozy. I wanted to send it back, but your mother went soft and didn't let me." Dr. Stone looked up from the far end of the living room where she was modeling ahead of their older sister, Mead. "Correction," she said. "Your father went soft. I would have let you starve. Mead, quit turning your head." "Check," announced their 4-year-old brother and got up from the floor where he had been playing chess with their grandmother. He ran toward them. "Hey, Cass, Paul, where you been? Did you go to the port? Why didn't you take me? Did you bring me anything?" Castor swung him up by his heels and held him upside down. "Yes, no, maybe, and why should we? Here, Paul, catch." He sailed the child through the air. His twin reached out and caught him still by the heels. "Check yourself," announced grandmother, "and mate in 3 moves. Shouldn't let your social life distract you from your game, lol." The youngster looked back at the board from his upside down position. "Wrong, Hazel. Now I let you take my queen, then blammy." His grandmother looked again at the board. "Huh? Wait a minute. Suppose I refuse your queen, then—" "Why, the little scamp, he's trapped me again." Mead said, "Shouldn't let him beat you so often, Hazel. It's not good for him. Mead, for the 9th time, quit turning your head." "Sorry, Mother. Let's take a rest." Grandmother snorted. "You don't think I let him beat me on purpose, do you? You play him. I am giving up the game for good." Mead answered just as her mother spoke. At the same time, Pollux chucked the boy back to Castor. "You take him. I want to eat." The child squealed. Mr. Stone shouted, "Quiet!" "And stay quiet," he went on, unfastening the throat mic. "How is a man to make a living in all this racket? This episode has to be done over completely, sent to New York tomorrow, shot, canned, distributed, and on the channels by the end of the week. It's not possible." "Then don't do it," Dr. Stone answered serenely, "or work in your room. It's soundproof." Mr. Stone turned to his wife. My dear, I've explained 1,000 times that I can't work in there by myself. I get no stimulation. I fall asleep. Castor said, "How's it going, Dad? Rough?" "Well, now that you ask me, the villains are way ahead and I don't see a chance for our heroes. I thought of a gimmick while Paul and I were out. You have this young kid you introduced into the story slide into the control room while everybody is asleep. They don't suspect him, see, because he's too young, so they haven't put him in irons. Once in the control room," Castor stopped and looked crestfallen. "No, it won't do. He's too young to handle the ship. He wouldn't know how." "Why do you say that?" his father objected. "All I have to do is to plant that he had a chance to. Let me see." He stopped. His face went blank. "No," he said presently. "No good, huh?" "Huh? What?" "Oh, it smells, but I think I can use it. Stevenson did something like it in Treasure Island, and I think he's got it from Homer. Let's see if we. He again went into his trance. Pollux had opened the warming cupboard. Castor dropped his baby brother on the floor and accepted a dinner pack from his twin. He opened it. "Meat pie again," he stated bleakly and sniffed it. "Synthetic, too." "Say that over again and louder," his sister urged him. "I've been trying for weeks to get Mother to subscribe to another restaurant." "Don't talk, Mead," Dr. Stone answered. "I'm modeling your mouth." Grandmother Stone snorted. "You youngsters have it too easy. When I came to the moon, there was a time when we had nothing but soybeans and coffee powder for 3 months." Mead answered, "Hazel, last time you told us about that, it was 2 months and it was tea instead of coffee. Young lady, who's telling this lie, you or me?" Hazel stood up and came over to her twin grandsons. What were you two doing at Dan Akezian's lot?" Castor looked at Pollux, who looked back. Castor said cautiously, "Who told you that we were there? Don't try to kid your grandmother. When have you been on?" The entire family joined her in chorus. "On the moon as long as I have." Hazel sniffed. "Sometimes I wonder why I married." Her son said, "Don't try to answer that question," then continued to his sons, "Well, what were you doing there?" Castor consulted Pollux by eye, then answered, "Well, Dad, it's like this." His father nodded. "Your best flights of imagination always start that way. Attend carefully, everybody. Well, you know that money that you're holding for us? What about it?" 3% isn't very much." Mr. Stone shook his head vigorously. "I will not invest your royalties in some wildcat stock. Financial genius may have skipped my generation, but when I turn that money over to you, it will be intact." "That's just it. It worries you. You could turn it over to us now and quit worrying about it." "No, you are too young." "We weren't too young to earn it." His mother snickered. "They got you, Roger. Come here and I'll see if I can staunch the blood." Miss Dr. Stone said serenely, "Don't heckle Roger when he's coping with the twins, Mother. Mead, turn a little to the left." Mr. Stone answered, "You've got a point there, Cass, but you may still be too young to hang on to it. What is this leading up to?" Castor signaled with his eyes. Pollux took over. "Dad, we've got a really swell chance to take that money and put it to work. Not a wildcat stock, not a stock at all. We'll have every penny right where we can see it, right where we could cash in on it at any time. And in the meantime, we'll be making lots more money." "Huh, how?" "We buy a ship and put it to work." His father opened his mouth. Castor cut in swiftly. "We can pick up a Detroiter 7 cheap and overhaul it ourselves. We won't be out a cent for wages." Pollux filled in without a break. "You've said yourself, Dad, that we're both born mechanics. We've got the hands for it." Castor went on. "We'd treat it like a baby because it would be our own." Pollux. Got both certificates, control and power. We wouldn't need any crew." Castor. "No overhead. That's the beauty of it." Pollux. "So we carry trade goods out to the asteroids. We bring back a load of high grade. We can't lose." Castor. 400%, maybe 500. Pollux. "More like 600. Castor. "No worries for you." Pollux. "And we'd be out of your hair." Castor. "Not late for dinner." Pollux had his mouth open when his father again yelled, "Quiet!" He went on, "Edith, bring the barrel. It's time we use it." Mr. Stone had a theory, often expressed, that the boys should be raised in a barrel and fed through the bunghole. The barrel had no physical existence. Dr. Stone said, "Yes, dear," and went on modeling. Grandmother Stone said, Don't waste your money on a Detroiter. They're unstable. The gyro system's no good. Wouldn't have one as a gift. Get a Douglas. Mr. Stone turned to his mother. Hazel, if you are going to encourage the boys in this nonsense, not at all, not at all. Merely intellectual discussion. Now, with a Douglas, they could make some money. A Douglas has a very favorable. Hazel, his mother broke off, then said thoughtfully, as if to herself, I know there's free speech on the moon. I wrote it into the charter myself. Roger Stone turned back to his sons. See here, boys, when the Chamber of Commerce decided to include pilot training in their youth welfare program, I was all for it. I even favored it when they decided to issue junior licenses to anybody who graduated high in the course. When you two got your jets, I was as proud as could be. It's a young man's game. They license commercial pilots at 18 and they retire them at 30, added Castor. We haven't any time to waste. We'll be too old for the game before you know it. Pipe down. I'll do the talking for a bit. If you think I'm going to draw that money out of the bank and let you two young yahoos go gallivanting around the system in a pile of sky junk that will probably blow the first time you go over 2 Gs, you had better try another think. Besides, you're going down to Earth for school next semester. We've been to Earth, answered Castor, and we didn't like it, added Pollux. Too dirty, likewise too noisy. Groundhogs everywhere, Castor finished. Mr. Stone brushed it aside. 2 weeks you were there, not time enough to find out what the place is like. You'll love it once you get used to it. Learn to ride horseback, play baseball, see the ocean. A lot of impure water, Castor answered. Horses are to eat. Take baseball, Castor continued. It's not practical. How can you figure a 1G trajectory and place your hand at the point of contact in free flight time between bases? We're not miracle men. I played it. But you grew up in a 1G field. You've got a distorted notion of physics. Anyhow, why would we want to learn to play baseball? When we come back, we wouldn't be able to play it here, or you might crack your helmet. Mr. Stone shook his head. Games aren't the point. Play baseball or not as it suits you, but you should get an education. What does Luna City Technical lack that we need? And if so, why? After all, Dad, you were on the Board of Education. I was not. I was the mayor. Which made you member ex officio, Hazel told us. Mr. Stone glanced at his mother. She was looking elsewhere. He went on, Tech is a good school of its sort, but we don't pretend to offer everything at Tech. After all, the moon is still an outpost, a frontier. But you said, Pollux interrupted, in your retiring speech as mayor, that Luna City was the Athens of the future and the hope of a new age. Poetic license. Tech is still not Harvard. Don't you boys want to see the world's great works of art? Don't you want to study the world's great literature? We've read Ivanhoe, said Castor, and we don't want to read The Mill on the Floss, added Pollux. We prefer your stuff. My stuff? My stuff isn't literature. It's more of an animated comic strip. We like it, Castor said firmly. His father took a deep breath. Thank you. Which reminds me that I still have a full episode to sweat out tonight, so I will cut this discussion short. In the first place, you can't touch the money without my thumbprint, and from now on I intend to go about wearing gloves. In the second place, both of you are too young for an unlimited license. You could get us a waiver for OutSystem. When we got back, we'd probably be old enough for unlimited. You're too young, Castor said. Why, Dad, not half an hour ago you accepted a gimmick from me in which you were going to have an 11-year-old kid driving a ship. I'll raise his age. It'll ruin your gimmick. Confound it. That's just fiction, and poor fiction at that. It's hokum, dreamed up to sell merchandise. He suddenly looked suspiciously at his son. Cass, you planted that gimmick on me just to give yourself an argument in favor of this harebrained scheme. Castor looked pious. Why, Father, how could you think such a thing? Don't father me. I can tell a hawk from a handsaw. Anybody can, Grandmother Hazel commented. The hawk class is a purely commercial type, while the handshaw runabout is a sports job. Come to think of it, boys, a handshaw might be better than a Douglas. I like its fractional controls. And Hazel, snapped her son, quit encouraging the boys and quit showing off. You're not the only engineer in the family. I'm the only good one, she answered smugly. Oh, yes, nobody ever complained about my work. Then why did you quit? You know why. Fiddle with finicky figures for months on end, and what have you got? A repair dock or a stamping mill, and who cares? So you aren't an engineer. You're merely a man who knows engineering. Well, what about yourself? You didn't stick with it. No, she admitted, but my reasons were different. I saw three big hairy male men promoted over my head, and not one of them could do a partial integration without a pencil. Presently, I figured out that the Atomic Energy Commission had a bias on the subject of women, no matter what the civil service rules said. So I took a job dealing blackjack. Luna City didn't offer much choice in those days, and I had you to support. The argument seemed about to die out. Castor judged it was time to mix it up again. Hazel, do you really think that we should go for a handshaw? I'm not sure we can afford it. Well, now you really need a third crewman, and do you want to buy in? Mr. Stone interrupted. Hazel, I will not stand by and let you encourage this. I'm putting my foot down. You'd look silly standing there on one foot. Don't try to bring me up, Roger. At 95, my habits are fairly well set. 95 indeed. Last week you were 85. It's been a hard week. Back to our muttons. Why don't you go buy in with them? You could go along and keep them out of trouble. What, me? Mr. Stone took a deep breath. A Marine Guard couldn't keep those two junior model Napoleons out of trouble. I know, I've tried. B, I do not like a handshaw. They are fuel hogs. C, I have to turn out 3 episodes a week of The Scourge of the Spaceways, including one that must be taped tonight if this family will ever quiet down. Roger, his mother answered, trouble in this family is like water for fish, and nobody asked you to buy a handshaw. As to your third point, give me a blank spool and I will dictate the next 3 episodes tonight while I'm brushing my hair. Hazel's hair was still thick and quite red, and so far no one had caught her dyeing it. It's about time you broke that contract anyway. You've won your bet. Her son winced. 2 years before, he had let himself be trapped into a bet that he could write better stuff than was being channeled up from Earth, and had gotten himself caught in a quicksand of fat checks and options. I can't afford to quit, he said feebly. What good is money if you don't have time to spend it? Give me that spool and the box. You can't write it. Want to bet? Her son backed down. No one had yet won a bet with Hazel. That's beside the point. I'm a family man. I've got Edith and Buster and Meade to think about, too. Meade turned her head again. If you're thinking about me, Daddy, I'd like to go. Why, I've never been any place except that one trip to Venus and twice to New York. Hold still, Meade, Dr. Stone said quietly. She went on to her husband. You know, Roger, I was thinking just the other day how cramped this apartment is, and we haven't been any place, as Meade says, since we got back from Venus. Mr. Stone stared. You too, Edith? This apartment is bigger than any ship compartment, you know that. Yes, but a ship seems bigger. In free fall, one gets so much more use out of the room. My dear, do I understand that you are supporting this junket? Oh, not at all. I was speaking in general terms. But you do sleep better aboard ship. You never snore in free fall. I do not snore. Dr. Stone did not answer. Hazel snickered. Pollux caught Castor's eye, and Castor nodded. The two slipped quietly away to their own room. It was a lot of trouble to get Mother involved in a family argument, but worth the effort. Nothing important was ever decided until she joined in. And we'll find out how the argument turns out, if you think that's a surprise, next time.